He was a king in a world of his own, making a titan of Wall Street named Lucas Croft as he toasted champagne with his mistress on the deck of his super yacht. The Serenity, the skyline of Manhattan, glittered like a pile of diamonds he had personally conquered. He felt untouchable. But 70 miles away, in a sterile hospital room, his wife Eleanor was giving birth to his son, her silent screams swallowed by the city noise. She was alone. Lucas had silenced his phone, silencing his conscience. He didn't know that as his child took his first breath, a different kind of birth was happening, the birth of a reckoning. An email sent by a woman in labor was about to bring his kingdom crashing down. Lucas Croft believed he was the master of his universe. At 38, he had the kind of wealth that didn't just whisper, it roared. His firm, Croft Capital, had its gleaming name emblazoned on a skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan. His life was a meticulously curated collection of assets, a penthouse on Park Avenue with panoramic views of Central Park, a fleet of European sports cars gleaming in a climate-controlled garage, and a trophy wife, Eleanor, whose beauty and pedigree were as flawless as the Hope Diamond. Eleanor Vance Croft was on the surface the perfect complement to his empire. The daughter of a respected old-money family, she moved with an innate grace that Lucas, who had clawed his way up from a working-class background in Queens, had always admired and coveted. She was his final acquisition, the one that solidified his place in the stratosphere of New York society. When she became pregnant, it was the logical next step, the creation of an heir to the Croft dynasty. To the outside world, they were a power couple. They were photographed at the Met Gala, their smiles perfectly calibrated. They hosted fundraisers where Lucas's booming laughter filled rooms, while Eleanor drifted between guests, a vision in couture maternity where her presence a soft, calming counterpoint to his aggressive energy. But inside the gilded cage of their penthouse, the air had grown thin. The silence between them was vast and cold, broken only by the polite, hollow formalities of their shared existence. Lucas found her quietness unnerving, her placid agreement, a form of passive resistance he couldn't dominate. In the early days, he'd mistaken her gentle nature for fragility. Now, he saw it as a void. A void he felt an insatiable need to fill with noise, with excitement, with risk. That was where Sasha Petrova came in. Sasha was everything Eleanor was not. She was a fiery, ambitious art dealer. From Russia, her accent a low, seductive purr. She was 26, with a body honed by discipline and a mind sharpened by a ruthless hunger for success. She didn't just look at Lucas. She saw him reflecting his own ambition and appetites back at him with an intensity that he found intoxicating. She wasn't just his mistress. She was his reflection in a funhouse mirror, all his sharpest, most dangerous qualities exaggerated and celebrated. Their affair began as a spark at an Art Basel event in Miami and quickly roared into a conflagration. It was a whirlwind of last-minute flights on the NetJets Gulfstream, clandestine meetings in the private suites of the Baccarat Hotel, and a constant thrilling dance on the edge of discovery. Sasha made him feel young, vital, and most importantly seen for the predator he was not, the philanthropist he pretended to be. As Eleanor's pregnancy progressed, her world shrank, while Lucas's expanded. Her body, once a source of quiet pride, became a vessel alien and demanding. She spent her days consulting with decorators for the nursery, a symphony of muted grays and creams, and meeting with her obstetrician at Mount Sinai. She was a model of maternal preparedness. She never called him at the office. She never questioned him when he said he was flying to London for a 24-hour deal or working late with his team. Her trust, it seemed, was absolute. Lucas interpreted this as acquiescence, a silent understanding that men like him had certain needs. He told himself it was for the best. He provided Eleanor with a life of unimaginable luxury and security. In return, she provided him with a legacy. His dalliances with Sasha were a separate ledger, a necessary expense for maintaining his own sanity and drive. The plan for the yacht trip was born out of a particularly audacious impulse. It was the last weekend in August, sweltering and thick. Eleanor's due date was a week away, but her doctor had mentioned that first babies were often late. She's resting at the Hamptons estate, Lucas had told his secretary, booking the time off. The sea air is good for her. I need to stay in the city to close the quarter. It was a lie layered on a lie. Eleanor was indeed at their Sagaponack mansion, but she wasn't resting peacefully. She was swollen, uncomfortable, and deeply lonely, wandering the cavernous ocean front home like a ghost. Lucas, meanwhile, was preparing to take his 180-foot super yacht, the Serenity, out for a 48-hour jaunt with Sasha. Is this wise, Lucas? Sasha had asked, tracing the lapel of his Tom Ford suit as they sat in a dark corner of a Soho bar. So close to everything. It's perfect, Lucas had countered, his voice low and confident. No one will think to look for me on my own boat. Everyone thinks it's being detailed in Fort Lauderdale. We'll go down to the canyons, do some fishing. Just you and me. My phone will be off. 2 days of absolute peace before the screaming starts. He meant the baby, but the words hung in the air with a dark irony. The night of the departure was a masterclass in deception. Lucas kissed Eleanor's cheek at the Hamptons house that morning. I have to go back to the city, darling. Last-minute crisis with the fund. I'll be back as soon as I can. Call me if you feel anything at all. Her blue eyes, which seemed larger and more weary than ever, met his. Of course, Lucas. Be safe. There was no accusation, no suspicion. Just a quiet, unnerving calm. He left in the black Cadillac Escalade, but instead of heading west to Manhattan, the driver turned east toward the Montauk Yacht Club, where the Serenity and its skeleton crew awaited along with Sasha, who had arrived in a separate car. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a fiery orange glow across the water, the Serenity slipped its moorings and powered out into the Atlantic. Lucas stood on the top deck, a glass of Macallan 25 in his hand, Sasha's arm linked through his. The sea spray felt like a baptism washing away the cloying domesticity of his other life. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated freedom. He took out his iPhone, looked at the screen, and with a sense of ceremony, powered it down. Total disconnection. 70 miles away, in the manicured grounds of the Sagaponack estate, Eleanor Croft stood on the bluestone patio, her hand pressed against the small of her back. She watched the last sliver of sun disappear. A sharp, unfamiliar pain seized her, radiating from her spine and tightening around her belly like a band of steel. She gasped, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the railing. It was starting. She took a deep, steadying breath. Her face in the twilight was not one of panic. It was a mask of cold, hard resolve. She walked calmly back into the house, her movements deliberate. She ignored the landline on the marble countertop and the list of emergency contacts pinned to the Sub-Zero refrigerator. Instead, she picked up her own sleek, encrypted smartphone. She dialed the number of her driver, a retired NYPD detective she had hired herself months ago. Robert, she said, her voice perfectly level despite the contraction now gripping her. "It's time. Please take me to the city, Mount Sinai." As Robert's car sped along the Long Island Expressway, its red lights flashing, Eleanor worked. With her thumb, she navigated through the secure folders on her phone. She opened a pre-drafted email, the recipient line already filled with the name of a person Lucas had never heard of. Annalise Adler, senior partner at Adler and Associates, a boutique law firm specializing in forensic financial litigation. The body of the email was simple and devastatingly precise. It contained dates, times, flight manifests from NetJets, credit card statements from Amex Centurion, and a link to a private cloud server containing high-resolution photographs of Lucas and Sasha taken by a private investigator over the past 6 months. The final attachment was a signed and notarized copy of a document Lucas had barely glanced at when he signed it a year ago, a post-nuptial agreement with a very specific, very unusual infidelity clause. A clause that triggered an immediate and irrevocable transfer of assets upon documented proof of infidelity occurring within the 48-hour window surrounding the birth of their firstborn child. Eleanor reviewed the email one last time as another wave of pain washed over her. She pressed her eyes shut, not in agony, but in focus. She thought of Lucas on his yacht, blissfully unaware, feeling free. A small, mirthless smile touched her lips. She pressed send. The message left her phone at 9:17 p.m. At that exact moment on the deck of the Serenity, Lucas Croft raised his glass. "To us, Sasha," he said, his voice booming over the sound of the waves. Untouchable. The birth of Harrison Vance Croft was a storm, but a quiet one. Eleanor had insisted on no family, no friends. She had her driver Robert and a private doula. She had hired a woman with kind eyes and firm hands. She moved through the stages of labor with a stoicism that stunned the nursing staff at Mount Sinai's private birthing suite. They were accustomed to hysterics, to demands, to husbands pacing anxiously in the hallways. They were not accustomed to this. Eleanor Croft was an island of chilling calm in a sea of her own agony. During the lulls between contractions, she wasn't resting. Her phone was in her hand, the screen's glow illuminating her pale, sweating face. She was in a text chain with Annalise Adler, her lawyer. Annalise email received. All documents verified. The PI. As final time-stamped photos from Montauk are conclusive, we are green. Eleanor proceed. Inform the trustees. Annalise, they are on standby. The moment we have a birth certificate with a time of death, the covenants of the trust are activated. Are you sure, Eleanor? There's no going back from this. Eleanor waited as another contraction crested, breathing through it with the technique her doula whispered in her ear. Her grip on the hospital bed rail was the only sign of the torment. When the wave passed, she typed her reply with a steady thumb. Eleanor, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Let the dominoes fall. Meanwhile, the Serenity was a bubble of decadent oblivion. Lucas and Sasha had a lavish dinner prepared by the onboard chef, seared scallops, Wagyu beef, and a chocolate lava cake that oozed decadence. They drank a bottle of 1996 Cru Clos d'Ambonnet, laughing as the yacht gently rocked them. Later, they lay on a sun lounger on the aft deck, staring up at a star-dusted sky unpolluted by city lights. I could get used to this, Sasha murmured, her head on his chest. No phones, no emails, just the sea. This is what it's all for, Lucas said, feeling a profound sense of rightness. This was the reward. The brutal hours, the high-stakes risks, the soulless marriage, it all led to this perfect stolen moment of peace. He felt a pang of something, a fleeting image of Eleanor's face, but he pushed it away. She was fine. She had everything she could ever want. She was safe. The next morning, Lucas awoke to the sun streaming through the master suite's portholes. He felt reborn. He and Sasha had a light breakfast, then took the jet skis out, racing each other across the glassy water, their laughter echoing in the morning stillness. It was a perfect day. Around noon, the yacht's captain, a seasoned mariner named Dave, approached Lucas. "Mr. Croft, sir, a bit of an issue. The satellite service for the credit card machine is acting up. I tried to run the card for the week's fuel pre-purchase, and it was declined." Lucas waved a dismissive hand. "It's Amex. They probably flagged it as fraud since I'm in the city. Try it again. Or use the backup." He gave him the details of his JP Morgan Reserve card. An hour later, Dave returned, his expression now troubled. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you again. The JP Morgan card was also declined. And the company debit card. They all say the same thing. Account frozen. Contact financial institution." Lucas's good mood evaporated instantly. Annoyance, hot and sharp, pricked at him. "What the hell? Get me the sat phone. I'll sort this out in 5 minutes." He retreated to the cool, wood-paneled study, leaving Sasha sunbathing on the deck. He dialed the private number for his personal banker at Goldman Sachs, a man named Marcus Thorne. "Lucas, good to hear from you. I thought you were laying low this weekend," Marcus said, his voice smooth and obsequious as always. "Marcus, I've got a problem. My cards are being declined, all of them. There must be a system-wide glitch. Can you look into it? I'm in the middle of the Atlantic, and it's a bit inconvenient." There was a pause, followed by the soft clicking of a keyboard. The silence stretched. Lucas could hear his own breathing. "Lucas," Marcus said, his voice suddenly stripped of its warmth, replaced by a formal, cautious tone. "There's no glitch." "What do you mean there's no glitch? Then what is it?" Lucas snapped. I can't discuss the specifics, Lucas. There's a flag on your portfolio. A legal hold. All assets under your personal and corporate control have been frozen pending review. Your trading accounts, your credit lines, your liquid cash accounts, everything. Lucas felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a child. A legal hold. What legal hold? Who placed it? I haven't been served with any papers. The instruction came from a court order executed this morning at 900 a.m. sharp, Marcus said, his voice clipped. It was enacted by the trustees of a newly activated entity, the Harrison Vance Croft Trust. Lucas's mind went blank. What? Who the hell is Harrison Vance Croft? The name was unfamiliar, alien. It took a long, terrifying moment for the pieces to click into place. Harrison, a name Eleanor had mentioned liking once. Vance, her family name. Croft, his name. The sat phone suddenly felt slippery in his hand. "Marcus," he said slowly, "is my wife? Has there been any news about my wife?" Another pause. More typing. "I wouldn't normally have this information, but the legal order included a number of supporting documents. According to the records we received, Eleanor Croft gave birth to a son, Harrison Vance Croft, at 4:12 a.m. this morning at Mount Sinai Hospital." The air left Lucas's lungs. 4:12 a.m. At that moment, he had been fast asleep, drunk on champagne and self-satisfaction, with Sasha curled up beside him. His son was born, and he had been here. The betrayal was so immense, so absolute, it was almost abstract. But the consequences were becoming horrifyingly real. The trust. Lucas stammered, his mind racing. What trust? I never authorized any trust. It appears to have been established via a contingency clause in your post-nuptial agreement, Marcus said, now sounding like a man reading a script. I'm sorry, Lucas, but my instructions are clear. I can't authorize any transfers or release any funds. I have to refer you to your legal counsel. I truly am sorry. The line went dead. Lucas stared at the phone. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't possible. Eleanor, quiet, gentle, predictable Eleanor, the woman who couldn't decide on a caterer without his approval. It had to be a mistake, a hostile takeover. Her old money family trying to strong-arm him. He stormed out of the study and onto the sun-drenched deck. Sasha sat up, pulling her sunglasses down. Is everything okay, Jay? No, everything is not okay, he snarled, his voice raw with a panic he couldn't contain. We're going back. Now. He turned to the captain. Dave, turn this thing around. Get us back to Montauk now. His kingdom was under siege. The call had come from inside the house. And as the Serenity made a wide sweeping turn, its engines roaring in protest, Lucas Croft finally understood the chilling meaning of true power. It wasn't about the money you had, it was about who controlled it. And in one stunning, brutal move, control had shifted entirely. The 2-hour journey back to Montauk was the longest of Lucas Croft's life. The sun, which had seemed so benevolent just that morning, now felt accusatory, its glare amplifying his throbbing headache. The carefree atmosphere on the Serenity had curdled into a thick, anxious silence. Sasha sat across from him in the main salon, her face a mask of carefully constructed concern, but her eyes darted around the lavish interior, as if assessing its value before it vanished. Lucas was a whirlwind of frantic energy. He was back on the satellite phone, a lifeline to a world that was rapidly ceasing to recognize his authority. He called his lead attorney a bulldog of a man named Frank Garrison. Frank, what the hell is going on? Lucas yelled, pacing the confines of the salon. Marcus Thorne at Goldman is telling me my accounts are frozen. He mentioned a trust. He mentioned Eleanor. Frank's voice was grim. Lucas, I've been trying to reach you all morning. I'm looking at the court order now. It's ironclad. Ironclad? What do you mean ironclad? It's my money. How can she just take it? She didn't just take it, Lucas, Frank said, his tone sharp, cutting through Lucas's panic. She executed a contract. A contract you signed. Do you remember the post-nuptial agreement from last year? Lucas's mind flashed back. He remembered Eleanor bringing it up, something about protecting her family's assets in case something happened to them, ensuring the baby was provided for. It had seemed responsible. He'd been in a hurry on his way to a meeting. He'd barely read the thing. He trusted Frank to have vetted it. You looked it over, Frank. You said it was standard. It was standard mostly. Frank admitted a defensive edge to his voice. Standard protections for dynastic wealth. But her lawyer slipped in a clause I'd never seen before. Clause 11B. The fiduciary morality clause. I flagged it. I told you it was unusual. I have the email, Lucas. You told me, and I quote, just get it done. Eleanor's happy, I'm happy. Lucas sank into a plush sofa, the fine Italian leather feeling cold against his skin. Fiduciary morality clause. The words sounded like a death sentence. What does it do? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. It stipulates that in the event of a marital indiscretion proven by verifiable evidence occurring within the 48-hour perinatal period, that's 24 hours before birth, and 24 hours after control of all marital assets, specifically liquid capital and securities held in your name, would be immediately and irrevocably transferred to a trust established for the sole benefit of your direct heir, a trust of which she, as the child's primary guardian, is the sole acting trustee until the child reaches the age of 25. Lucas's blood ran cold. The sheer diabolical precision of it was breathtaking. It wasn't a divorce filing, it was a corporate raid. She hadn't just caught him, she had leveraged his betrayal with the skill of a seasoned hedge fund manager executing a short squeeze. The evidence, Frank. What evidence? She has everything. Lucas Frank's voice was heavy with defeat. Private investigator reports. Photos of you and Ms. Petrova in Miami, London, at the Baccarat. The final nail in the coffin was a time-stamped photo of you both boarding the Serenity at Montauk last night. The filing was submitted to the court this morning alongside a certified copy of your son's birth certificate. The timing is perfect. The judge signed the order before the market opened. Lucas looked over at Sasha. She was watching him, her face unreadable. He had thought their affair was a secret, a thrilling exception to the rules. Instead, it had been a meticulously documented data point in Eleanor's cold calculus. Who is her lawyer? Lucas demanded. Who could have come up with something like this? Annalise Adler-Frank replied. They call her the shark in the skirt. Specializes in high-stakes financial litigation for wronged wives of the 1%. She's a killer, Lucas. She doesn't just win cases, she annihilates opponents. You didn't just get caught cheating. You walked into the most sophisticated legal bear trap I've ever seen. The call ended. Lucas was left in the echoing silence of the salon, the hum of the yacht's powerful engines the only sound. He was adrift in more ways than one. He had no money, no access. The yacht he was on the fuel, it was burning. The captain at the helm, he could no longer pay for any of it. He was a king who had been summarily ejected from his own throne. Sasha finally spoke, her voice soft, but laced with a new pragmatic edge. Lucas, what does this mean? For us. He looked at her perfect tanned skin, and her worried expression, and for the first time, he saw her not as a thrilling escape, but as a co-conspirator in his own destruction. She was the weapon that had been used against him. It means the party's over, he said, the words tasting like ash. When the Serenity finally docked at Montauk, the scene was one of quiet humiliation. The dockmaster approached with a bill for the slip fee and fuel. Lucas, the man who could buy the entire marina on a whim, had nothing to offer but a hollow promise. My lawyer will be in touch to arrange payment. The man's disbelieving sneer was more cutting than any legal jargon. He had to call his driver to come and collect him. The Escalade that had whisked him away to his fantasy was now his chariot back to reality. The ride with Sasha was a study in awkwardness. The electric chemistry between them was gone, replaced by the acrid smell of financial ruin. I should probably find my own way back to the city, she said, as they neared the Hamptons. It wasn't a question. Probably for the best, Lucas replied, his voice flat. He didn't have the energy to pretend. The affair, the passion, the entire fantasy had been predicated on the limitless resources that were no longer his. Without the backdrop of private jets and five-star suites, they were just two people who had made a terrible mistake. She was a liability he could no longer afford. He had her dropped at the East Hampton train station. She got out of the car without a backward glance, disappearing into the crowd of weekenders returning to the city. There was no dramatic farewell, just the quiet, unceremonious end of a bad investment. Lucas directed the driver to the Sagaponack estate. He needed to see the house, to touch something that still felt like his, even though he now suspected that was an illusion too. The grand house was empty and silent. Eleanor and the baby were, of course, in the city. He walked through the cavernous rooms, each one a testament to a life he no longer led. On the kitchen island, where he'd left a casual note 2 days before, there was a single thick envelope addressed to him in Eleanor's elegant script. His hands trembled as he opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was a single sheet of paper, a statement for a new bank account. The account name was Eleanor Vance Croft, Trustee. The balance, printed in crisp black ink, was $870, $451, $982, $334. Underneath the staggering number was a handwritten note. Lucas, this is the portfolio's liquid balance as of market close on Friday. Your personal effects will be delivered to your parents' house in Queens by the end of the week. The locks on the penthouse have been changed. Do not attempt to contact me. All future communication will be conducted via our lawyers. A monthly allowance of $5,000 has been arranged for you, deposited into your old checking account. I believe that is sufficient for your basic needs. Eleanor, $5,000 a month. To a man whose monthly wine budget often exceeded 6 figures. It wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a mockery, a complete and utter castration. He crumpled the paper in his fist, a strangled roar of fury and disbelief tearing from his throat. The sound echoed through the empty mansion, a house built with his money decorated to his wife's taste, and now a monument to his spectacular fall. He was no longer the master of the universe. He was a tenant in his own life, and the rent was due. To understand how Eleanor Croft, the quiet, unassuming socialite, became the architect of one of the most brutal financial takedowns in New York's high society, one had to understand her father, Thomas Vance. Thomas was not a banker or a broker. He was something far more dangerous to men like Lucas. He was a forensic accountant for the SEC, a man who spent 40 years following the money, untangling the sophisticated knots of fraud and deception woven by the titans of industry. Eleanor had grown up, not with bedtime stories, but with case studies. While other girls played with dolls, she learned about shell corporations, offshore accounts, and the myriad ways powerful men hid their assets and their sins. Her father had taught her that the world ran on 2 things, ego and leverage. He'd shown her how the ego of a powerful man was his greatest vulnerability, and how the right leverage applied at the right time could bring any empire to its knees. When she married Lucas Croft, she was not naive. She was in love, yes, but it was a clear-eyed love. She saw his ambition, his drive, and the darkness that fueled it. She also saw the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Her father, before he passed away, had given her a piece of advice on her wedding day. "Enjoy the good times, my girl," he'd said, "but always have a parachute. Not a golden one, a Kevlar one." For the first few years, the marriage was good. Lucas was attentive, exciting, and he seemed to genuinely adore her. But slowly, as his wealth and power swelled to unimaginable levels, she saw the change. The late nights became more frequent, the business trips more opaque. He started looking through her, not at her. The man she married was being consumed by the monster of his own success. The discovery of the affair was mundane. A receipt for a hotel she knew he hadn't stayed at for business, left carelessly in a suit pocket. She didn't confront him. A confrontation would have been emotional, messy, and ultimately pointless. He would have lied, charmed her, bought her a diamond bracelet, and simply become more careful. Her father had taught her never to show your hand until you were ready to win the game. So she began her own quiet investigation. She wasn't looking for revenge, She was building her parachute. She hired the best people money could buy, not the thuggish private eyes of film noir, but a discreet firm run by ex-MI6 agents who specialized in corporate espionage. They were ghosts documenting Lucas's double life with chilling efficiency. At the same time, she sought out Annalise Adler. She had read about Adler in a Vanity Fair profile, a lawyer who represented the discarded first wives of billionaires. But Eleanor's case was different. She wasn't discarded yet. She was the active, present, and pregnant wife. In their first meeting in Adler's sleek minimalist office overlooking the East River, Eleanor laid out her objective. "I don't want a divorce," she stated, her voice calm and steady. "Divorce is a negotiation. I don't want to negotiate. I want to secure my child's future, a future built on the wealth my husband is currently squandering on his ego." Annalise, a woman with piercing grey eyes and a mind like a steel trap, was intrigued. "What do you have in mind, Mrs. Croft?" "My father once told me about a concept in contract law," Eleanor explained. "A morality clause so specific, so tailored to a single, indefensible moment that it becomes less a clause and more a surgical instrument. I want to create a trigger, an event that Lucas, in his arrogance, will believe could never happen, but that his compulsions will inevitably drive him toward." Together, they spent months crafting Clause 11B. It was a work of legal genius. They tied it to the birth of the child, the one event that should have been sacrosanct. They made the consequences not punitive damages in a divorce, but a fiduciary transfer. It wasn't about punishing Lucas. It was about protecting the assets for the heir. It was a move that was legally unimpeachable and morally devastating. Getting Lucas to sign it was the easiest part. She presented the post-nup to him on a Tuesday morning, right as he was about to leave for the office. She framed it as a nesting instinct, a desire to formalize their financial lives for the baby. "It's just to make sure the baby is the primary beneficiary of your estate, Lucas." "A formality?" she had said, her voice soft and reasonable. He was distracted already, thinking about the market, about a deal, about Sasha. He saw the document, saw his lawyer, Frank Garrison's name, on the email chain, and he signed it without a second thought. His ego, as her father had predicted, was his blind spot. He couldn't conceive of a world where quiet, compliant Eleanor could be playing chess while he was playing checkers. Throughout her pregnancy, she played her part to perfection. She was the dutiful, slightly overwhelmed, expectant mother. She allowed him to believe she was oblivious. Every late night at the office was another piece of evidence uploaded to the secure server. Every business trip was another nail in his coffin. The yacht trip was the final, perfect flourish. She knew he couldn't resist the audacity of it. Taking his mistress out on the boat named Serenity, while his wife was days from giving birth, it was the peak of his hubris, the perfect, indefensible moment she and Annalise had designed the entire strategy around. The night she went into labor, she was not alone in spirit. She was the commander in the field, executing a plan years in the making. The pain of childbirth was real, visceral, and all-consuming. But beneath it was a bedrock of cold fury and absolute certainty. She was not just bringing a child into the world, she was bringing her husband's world to an end. When she held Harrison for the first time, a tiny, perfect being with a tuft of dark hair, the feeling was overwhelming. It wasn't just the fierce, primal love of a mother for her child. It was a profound sense of vindication. She had not just saved herself, she had saved him. She had secured his legacy not from a market crash or a bad investment, but from the moral bankruptcy of his own father. In the days that followed, while Lucas was reeling, she was working. from her hospital bed, and then from the serene quiet of the newly secured penthouse, she and Annalise executed the next phase. They notified the boards of Lucas's companies. They installed an interim CEO at Croft Capital, a seasoned, steady hand chosen by Annalise. They communicated with the banks, the fund managers, the entire financial ecosystem that had once revolved around Lucas. The message was simple and absolute. The king is dead. Long live the Queen Regent. There was, of course, pushback. Men who had made millions with Lucas were furious. But Annalise Adler was a master at quelling insurrections. She presented them with a choice: accept the new reality and the stability of the Harrison Vance Croft Trust, or face a full forensic audit of the company's books. Given Lucas's penchant for aggressive, often borderline legal tactics, the choice was an easy one. Loyalty to Lucas evaporated in the face of potential SEC investigations. Eleanor felt no guilt. She had given Lucas every chance to be a husband and a father. She had endured the quiet humiliation of his affairs, the loneliness of her gilded cage. She had simply refused to be a victim. Her father had taught her that in the world of high finance, there are no victims, only fools and predators. She had been married to a predator, and to survive, she had to become something more. She had to become an apex predator. She had to become the architect of his ruin to build her son's future. A week after the freeze, Lucas Croft was a man hollowed out. He was staying in the guest room of his parents' modest house in Astoria, Queens. The room was a museum of his former life, high school football trophies, a faded poster of Gordon Gekko textbooks from his time at NYU Stern. It was a suffocating reminder of the ambition that had propelled him out of this world and the hubris that had sent him crashing back into it. His days were a humiliating cycle of phone calls to lawyers who now spoke to him in cautious, billable hour increments, calls to friends who were suddenly always stepping into a meeting. He was a pariah. His $5,000 allowance had arrived, a number so insulting it felt like a joke. He couldn't even afford to retain the kind of legal firepower he needed to fight Annalise Adler. He was trapped. Finally, after a week of silence, a message came. It wasn't from Eleanor, but from Adler's office. Ms. Croft will grant you a meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the Park Avenue residence. You will come alone. Do not be late. The penthouse, his penthouse. The indignity was staggering. He had to take the subway and a taxi to get there, a journey that felt like a pilgrimage of shame. The doorman, a man to whom Lucas had handed a $10,000 Christmas bonus every year, greeted him with a polite but firm, "I need to announce you, sir." When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The apartment had always been filled with his energy, his music, his booming voice. Now it was serene calm. It felt like her. Eleanor was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. She was not in a silk robe or a designer dress. She was wearing simple black trousers and a white cashmere sweater. She looked rested, healthy, and powerful. The postpartum fragility he had expected was nowhere to be seen. She held their son, Harrison, in her arms, wrapped in a simple white blanket. "Lucas," she said. Her voice was not angry or hurt. It was neutral, like a CEO addressing a subordinate. "Eleanor," he began, his own voice cracking. "We need to talk. This is insane. You can't just do this." "I can," she replied simply. "And I have. There's nothing left to talk about, really. The documents are quite clear. This is merely a courtesy." He took a step forward. "A courtesy? You've destroyed me. You've stolen my life." "No, Lucas," she said, her voice sharpening for the first time. I have secured my son's life. Your son. The life you were jeopardizing with your recklessness. This, she said, gesturing around the magnificent apartment, this was never your life. It was an asset. And you were mismanaging it. He stared at her dumbfounded. It was like talking to a stranger. The gentle, accommodating woman he had married was gone, replaced by this cool, formidable creature. The affair, Eleanor? I know. I am so sorry. It was a mistake. A terrible... She cut him off with a raised hand. Please don't. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was about a single mistake. It wasn't about Sasha Petrova. She was a symptom, not the disease. The disease is your ego, Lucas. The belief that the rules don't apply to you. The belief that you could have everything, the respectable wife and heir, and the sordid thrills on the side. The belief that I was just another one of your acquisitions, a beautiful painting on the wall that didn't have a mind of its own. She walked over to the large marble fireplace and turned to face him, shifting Harrison in her arms. For months, I watched you. I documented everything. Every lie, every trip, every dollar you spent, entertaining that woman while I was at home carrying your child. I gave you every opportunity to be a man of character. You chose at every turn to be a cliché. The cold, hard truth of her words hit him harder than any financial loss. She had seen it all. Her quietness hadn't been ignorance, it had been observation. Her compliance had been a strategy. Why, Eleanor, he pleaded his anger, giving way to a desperate need to understand. Why do it this way? Why not just file for divorce? A small, sad smile touched her lips. And what would have happened then? A messy public battle. Lawyers would get rich, the tabloids would have a field day, and in the end, you would have given me a fraction of your wealth to make me go away. You would have paid me off. But you would not have learned anything. You would have continued on your path, and Harrison would have grown up with a father who was a moral void, a man who valued nothing. She continued, her voice gaining strength. I didn't want your money for myself, Lucas. I wanted it for him. I wanted to protect his legacy from you. Now the Croft fortune is secure. It is in a trust that you cannot touch, a trust that will provide for him, for his education, for his future. Croft Capital is being run by competent professionals who value stability over reckless gambles. I did not destroy your life. I put it in receivership. He felt the floor drop out from under him. The sheer, breathtaking scope of her plan was finally clear. It wasn't an act of passion or revenge. It was a corporate restructuring of their entire life, with him identified as the single toxic asset to be removed. So what now? He asked, his voice hollow. I have nothing. I am nothing. You are a father, she said, her gaze softening for just a moment as she looked down at the sleeping baby. And you will be allowed to be one. A supervised one at first. You can see Harrison twice a week. Here. You will not be a part of his financial life, but you can, if you choose, be a part of his personal life. You can start over. You're still young. You're brilliant. You built an empire from nothing once. Perhaps you can build a life of character from nothing now. It was the cruelest blow of all. It wasn't just that she had taken his money. She had taken his identity and was now offering him a new one, a lesser one, on her terms. She was offering him redemption, but it was a redemption that required him to admit his own complete and utter failure. He looked at his son, his heir sleeping peacefully in the arms of the woman who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. He saw in that tiny, peaceful face a future he would have no part in, shaping a dynasty he had founded but would never rule. Defeated, He finally nodded. There was nothing else to do. He had no moves left. She had checkmated him before he even knew they were playing a game. "Okay, Eleanor," he whispered. "Okay." As he turned to leave, she said one last thing. "And Lucas, the yacht is being sold. The proceeds will be the first deposit into Harrison's college fund." He walked out of the apartment, the elevator doors closing on the life he had known. He was Lucas Croft, the man who had everything, who now had to learn to live with the one thing he had never valued: consequences. The city that had once felt like his kingdom now seemed vast and alien, a world in which he was just another man, starting from the bottom all over again. The fall of Lucas Croft was as swift as his rise had been meteoric. The story, leaked with surgical precision by Annalise Adler's PR team, became a legend in the corridors of Wall Street and the gossip columns of Page 6. It was a cautionary tale, whispered at exclusive bars and in private jets. The narrative was expertly shaped. This wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was the story of a brilliant, protective mother securing her child's legacy from a reckless, ego-driven father. Eleanor was portrayed not as a vengeful wife, but as a shrewd, almost mythical financial guardian. The shark in the skirt had earned her moniker once again. Lucas, stripped of his power and prestige, retreated into the obscurity of his parents' home. The first few months were a blur of shame and impotent rage. He tried to fight back, consulting with cheaper lawyers who promised him the world, but quickly realized they were hopelessly outgunned by Adler's legal fortress. The post-enup was unbreakable. The trust was a vault. His name, once a golden key that opened any door, was now toxic. No reputable firm would touch him. No bank would extend him a line of credit. His twice-weekly visits with Harrison were his only connection to his old life, and they were exercises in quiet humiliation. He would arrive at the Park Avenue penthouse, now run with serene efficiency by a staff loyal to Eleanor, and spend an hour in the designated playroom supervised by a nanny. He would hold his son, a beautiful growing baby, who looked disconcertingly like him, and feel a mix of profound love and bitter resentment. He was a visitor in his own son's life. Eleanor was rarely present for these visits, but her presence was everywhere. The apartment was different, less a showcase for modern art, and more a warm, functional home. Family photos featuring her and the baby began to appear on the tables. There were none of him. After 6 months of this purgatory, something in Lucas finally broke. Staring at his reflection in the mirror of his childhood bedroom one morning, he didn't see the Titan of Wall Street. He saw a tired, defeated man in his late 30s with nothing to his name but a meager allowance and a closet full of expensive suits he had no occasion to wear. He had hit rock bottom. And as the old cliché goes, the only way to go from rock bottom is up. He started small. He sold his collection of luxury watches, a painful concession, using the money to rent a small, one-bedroom apartment in Long Island City, just across the river from his old kingdom. He started taking the subway, not out of necessity, but as a choice. He started reading not market reports, but history, philosophy novels. He began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding not an empire, but a self. He got a job. It was a humiliating step down. A friend of a friend, taking pity on him, offered him a junior analyst position at a small boutique investment firm. He was working for men 15 years younger than him, men who either didn't know who he was or worse, did know, and smirked when he brought them coffee. The pay was a tiny fraction of what he once made in an hour, but he swallowed his pride and did the work. He was good at it. The raw talent was still there, buried under layers of hubris. Slowly, a different Lucas began to emerge. Stripped of the sycophants and the endless distractions of wealth, he found a quieter, more focused version of himself. His twice-weekly visits with Harrison became the anchor of his new life. He stopped seeing them as a humiliation and started seeing them for what they were, a privilege. He learned to change a diaper, to make his son laugh, to soothe him when he cried. He started leaving his phone in his pocket, giving the boy his undivided attention. Eleanor noticed the change. The nanny reported that Mr. Croft was different, calmer, more present, more patient. After a year, Eleanor began to occasionally stay in the room during his visits. Their conversations were stilted at first, polite and cautious, but gradually a new dynamic formed. They were no longer husband and wife, but two co-parents navigating a complex reality. He stopped blaming her and started for the first time to take true responsibility for his actions. One afternoon, as he was getting ready to leave, he turned to her. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet and sincere. "I know it's too late for us. I destroyed that. But I want to thank you." She looked at him surprised. "Thank me for what?" "For what you did," he said, the admission costing him the last, final shred of his old ego. "You took a wrecking ball to my life, and it was the only thing that could have saved me from myself. You didn't just save Harrison's future. In a strange way, you saved mine." Eleanor considered his words for a long moment. She saw in his eyes not the arrogant predator she had married, but a man who had been through a crucible and come out the other side. He was chastened, humbled, and perhaps for the first time, honest. "Go build a good life, Lucas," she said, her voice softer than he'd heard it in years. "Harrison deserves a father he can be proud of." That was the true beginning. Lucas Croft never regained his empire. He never made another $1 billion. But he built a life. He eventually rose to become a partner at the small firm, respected for his sharp mind and a newfound humility. He met someone new, a woman who loved him for the man he was not, the man he had been. Eleanor remained at the helm of her son's fortune, a formidable and respected figure in the world of finance and philanthropy. She never remarried, pouring her energy into raising Harrison and managing the trust with a steady, brilliant hand. She and Lucas established a peaceful, functional co-parenting relationship. They attended Harrison's school plays and baseball games, sitting a few seats apart, a quiet testament to their turbulent history and the stable peace they had finally achieved. The story of the millionaire who lost it all on his yacht became a modern fable. But the real story was more complex. It was a story of ruin, yes, but also of rebirth. A story of a woman who refused to be a footnote in her husband's life and instead wrote her own epic. And it was the story of a man who had to lose the entire world to finally find himself. What you've just heard isn't just a story of wealth and betrayal, it's a masterclass in consequence. It's about the collision of arrogance and intelligence, and how a woman pushed to the absolute limit used her mind as a weapon to protect her child and reclaim her power. This story feels real because the motivations are real: pride, love, ego, and the fierce primal instinct to protect one's own. Lucas Croft learned the hard way that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. Eleanor Croft proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. If this story of epic karma and strategic brilliance captivated you, imagine the other stories waiting to be told. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a story of ultimate justice. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more true life dramas that are stranger and more compelling than fiction.